Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new session of Ashram Talks. This is Subhadra from Colombia. And I'm really happy to have you here to continue discussing a topic that we've been talking about during the previous two episodes. Actually, last Monday with Anuradha, we were talking about verse 37, and we talked about the origin of anger, like what's the origin of wrath. So we came to the point of lust, and Anuradha was mentioning that when our desires are frustrated or when we cannot fulfill them, or we cannot even meet our expectations, then that can trigger our anger. So, in this episode, we're going to see a little bit more about that topic. We're going to dive deeper into that. And before we start, I'd just like to leave a question and for you to think of. If when our desires cannot be accomplished, we might become angry. Most likely, we will become angry. Then, what happens when we're able to fulfill those desires? Like, could we say that's the positive side of the whole situation? So, with this, I'd like to welcome Abhimanyu, who's going to be our speaker today to guide us through this verse. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here. So, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Subhadra Devidasi. Thank you for inviting me to speak here and to ultimately purify my own mind by getting the chance to repeat the words that our previous acharyas have shared. And so, in that spirit, I will offer some prayers invoking their blessings so that our discussion today may be enlivening for us spiritually. Sakshad haritvena samasta shastre ruktastata bhavyata eva sadbi kintu prabhoya priya eva tasya vande guru shri charanaravindam yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado yasya prasadan nagati kutopi dhyayanstu vangstasya yashastri sandhyam vande guru shri charanaravindam vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanang pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right, and so I'm very glad that Subhadra Dasi has asked the question about, okay, well, if anger arises from our desires being unfulfilled, then is it then just an act of good fortune when our desires are fulfilled and we don't have to face such anger? And what's interesting is that, in this Bhagavad Gita verse, we're on chapter 3, verse 39. If we can pull that up now. Let's see. So it's, yes, Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, verse 39. Shri Krishna says, Avritang jnanametena jnanino nityavairina kama rupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena cha. Thus, a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. And so it's, it is a very interesting question sometimes, especially if it's a long cherished desire, maybe we haven't had the chance to fulfill in a long time. We might think, okay, well, if I just got what I wanted here, then I'd be peaceful because then I wouldn't be burning with this desire that I have. But what we don't realize is that ultimately, simply the fulfillment of desires doesn't make desire go away. It just leads to more and more desires. As you know, in the Acharyas, the great teachers' explanations of this verse, they explain that it's sort of like if you pour ghee or any type of fuel on a fire, momentarily the fire does go down. When you pour, whether it's gasoline, whether it's ghee, the flames temporarily go down, but then shortly afterwards they spring back up even higher. And so this is the effect of satisfying materialistic or lusty desire in this world. And the way our spiritual teachers in our line talk about lust, what was it? Um, Krishnandriya, um, Atmandriya Priti Vanchatare Balikam, Krishnandriya Priti Icha Dare Premanam. That the desire to please one's own senses is designated as kam or lust, and the desire to please the senses of the absolute truth, to please the senses of Krishna, is described as prema. And so, kam or lust is understood to be a transformation of the original love of the spirit soul itself, transformed by rajagun, the mode of passion. So when that takes place, when one is uses their free will to try and enjoy this world separately from their relationship with the divine, that original loving tendency to please the senses of the absolute truth gets covered over by this experience of lust, of calm. And so simply satisfying the desires is not the answer. And yet, also earlier, it may have been in the same chapter where Krishna says the words "mityachara sa uchyate," that if one is simply meditating on, meditating on acting on with the active senses, if one is simply meditating on fulfilling desires, but externally sort of pretending to be renounced, Sri Krishna says, well, that person is a pretender. Mitya achara literally translates to false behavior. So mitya achara sa uchyate. Such a person is a pretender. They're meditating, or they're fantasizing. Let's put it in modern day terms. They're fantasizing about fulfilling desires. And again, lust traditionally refers to sexual desires. In the broader context, lust refers to any sort of desire to please one's own senses. So it includes but is not limited to sexual desire. So Krishna says if somebody is, fantasizing about fulfilling such desires, but is making a show of being really renounced and detached, that will not make the desires go away either. Because he says, by what can one accomplish by repression? So this leaves us in a dilemma. Krishna is saying you can't make lust go away just by repressing it, but you also can't make lust go away by fulfilling the desires that lust demands of us. And there are examples given in the scripture where different personalities say that. Let me read one of them out here. That from the Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, one personality said that even after I had served the so-called nectar of the lips of Urvashi, one of the heavenly damsels, for many years, within my heart my lusty desires kept rising again and again and were never satisfied, just like fire, which can never be extinguished by the oblations of ghee poured into its flames. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. If we repress our desires, they don't go away. Then that can lead to all kinds of anger. That can lead to resentment. That can lead to a lot of deep darkness. We're not even willing to admit that we want it, and yet deep down under the surface, we're going for it. I know my father; he would give an analogy that when we say we want one thing, but our actions indicate the exact opposite. It's sort of like, okay, I'm like an ant walking north, but I'm on the back of an elephant that's galloping south. So it looks like, okay, I'm trying to I'm trying to repress these. I'm trying to say, okay, well, I don't want to act on this desire, but all my actions indicate that I have these desires very deeply. And so then we sort of have to go beyond conventional logic. Okay, well, I can't just repress it, and I can't just satisfy it by fulfilling it. Even if one over fulfills it, there may be a temporary sense of disgust or detachment. Oh well, I partied so hard in my youth. I'm done with all that. And so for a temporary amount of time, that can give rise to a sense of detachment or disgust from sensual pleasure of whatever variety, whether that's sex, drugs, rock and roll, as they call it. But in time, again, because the nature of the soul, the nature of the soul is to enjoy, the nature of the soul is to love. And so eventually when the fatigue, the disgust, the detachment wears off, then such desires naturally arise again. And so what the acharyas talk about in these purports and in throughout the Vedic literatures, throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, is that ultimately it's by the association of very elevated saintly personalities, and specifically by hearing the topics of Krishna then gradually the lusty desires are removed from the heart, and the original desire of the spirit soul itself, the desire to please the senses of Krishna, the senses of the absolute truth, those desires start to awaken. And so by cultivating that positive sense of hearing about Krishna, of experiencing his beauty, then that sort of takes over. We gain what's called the higher taste, as it were. And so this process of developing the higher taste, it starts with hearing. And there's one very beautiful Bhagavatam verse that I will pull up for us now. It's from the third canto, chapter 9, verse 11. It's a fairly famous verse. Tvang bhakti yoga paribhavita hrit saroja aseshu tekshita pato nanunata pungsam yad yad dhyata urugaya vibhavayanti tat tadvapu pranayase sadanugrahaya. And the translation by our Srila Prabhupada is, "Oh my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you." And elsewhere, later in the same canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's the famous verse "Satam prasangan mama virya samvido," where Krishna says that the spiritual topics about Krishna, about the absolute truth, they're only considered very powerful when they're in prasanga, when they in the association of very highly advanced saintly personalities who really experience them as spirit souls, who are really awakening their sense of eternal love for Krishna in our particular form. Only in the association of such very elevated saintly personalities do the topics about me take on great power. Bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kata, that in the association of such elevated saintly persons, such pure devotees, then the topics of transcendence, the topics about Krishna consciousness, take on the quality of a rasayana. They nourish and soothe the heart and soul. Bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kata tajosha ashva bhavargavartmani. Then and thus by their mercy, by the association of very highly advanced spiritual personalities and hearing about Krishna day in and day out, then apavarga vartmani, we start to give up our inclination to try and enjoy this world separately from Krishna, and we give up the tendency to enjoy this world in ignorance or in lust. And shraddhara tir bhaktir anukramishyati, then we develop deep faith and attachment for a particular form of transcendence. And the verse again, as it says, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing. And so again, this goes against maybe empiric logic. Naturally, we see through the eyes and we hear through the ears. But in the spiritual sphere, it's a bit of a different process. It's the descending process where first we have to hear about the absolute truth submissively from a pure devotee, from one who has fully surrendered to and realized that absolute truth, Shri Krishna. Thank you, Subhadradasi, for pulling up that verse. Yes, oh my Lord, your devotees can see you through the hears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed and you take your seat there. And so, yes, by hearing about Krishna, then one actually gains the experience of seeing Krishna. And there's a curious incident in the life of Srila Prabhupada himself in this regard, that his spiritual master, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, I believe he was doing a parikrama or a pilgrimage of the Holy Land of Vrindavan, where Sri Krishna took his birth and had his childhood pastimes. And so he would, Srila Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada was going to give a discourse, a discussion on the topics about Krishna. And some of his disciples, they said, "Oh, we're going to visit this deity, this Murti of Krishna." And so they, instead of hearing the discourse, they went to view the deity. And our Abhay Charan, Srila Prabhupada, he remembers his spiritual master saying, "Oh, so they've gone for an eye exercise." And then he clarified that you cannot, view you cannot view the absolute truth, Sri Krishna, just by the empiric process, just by viewing with your eyes when you have that sort of materialistic demeanor. That one can only see the absolute truth as he's heard it from the lotus lips of a pure devotee. And so, apavarga vartmani shraddhavatir bhaktir anukra mishyati. that one, by hearing from the lips of a pure devotee, one gradually lets go of materialistic desires born of ignorance of our eternal identity, develops attachment for a particular form of God. And in Srila Prabhupada's explanation of this from Bhakti Yoga verse, he says that one develops this attachment for a particular form, um, and thus, he says, and thus the devotee becomes attached to the eternal form of the Lord, exactly like one who is already eternally attached. This attachment for a particular form of the Lord is called Svarup Siddhi. And so again, this process, it's all about giving up the independent I, me, mine. Even in our worship of the absolute truth, there's a sense that I'm developing an attachment for the absolute truth, just like his eternal associates. Very similar, not exactly the same, because we are eternally individual living entities. We're not just going to amalgamate into some other personality, but our love, even for Krishna, it follows in the footsteps. It yeah, it follows in the footsteps of one who already loves him very dearly. That for one who loves Krishna like a friend, he may become very attached to the love that Krishna's cowherd friends have. For one who is very enamored with the pastimes of Krishna's childhood pastimes with his parents, Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, then one will develop a love very similar to Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, and so on. And so, Shraddhavatir Bhaktir Anukramishyati, step by step, one develops such pure love of Godhead by hearing about Krishna from the lotus lips of pure devotees. And in some of our Acharya's commentary, I believe by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, lust itself, because the Sanskrit verse here says kama rupena, that it's ignorance in the form of lust, avidya, or ignorance in the form of lust. And so when the Acharyas talk about how does this ignorance, avidya, get dissipated from the heart, then oftentimes there are 5 specific verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam that are quoted in tandem. They're quoted by Srila Prabhupada in one of his prayers on the Jaladuta. They're quoted by, I believe, Srila Jiva Goswami in his commentary on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And so the first one, very famously, is Shinvatam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantasto Hyabhadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam. And so when Sri Krishna talks about this is actually Sri Sutta Goswami in the Srimad Bhagavatam talking about how does avidya, or lust, ignorance, become healed from the heart, healed and ultimately transformed into the original soul's nature of pure love of Godhead. So, Shrinvatam Svakata Krishna. I was studying these verses under one very saintly personality in India, and he didn't really speak English. He almost exclusively spoke Bengali, but and we so he would narrate. There would be a translator narrating what he was speaking to me. But there was one specific English phrase he memorized: continuous present tense. He said the word Shrinvatam in Sanskrit means continuous present tense. One must ongoingly, continuously hear about Krishna. So Shrinvatam Svakata Krishna. One must, in continuous present tense, hear topics about Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana. That simply the very act of hearing and then repeating what we've heard about Krishna, just that act alone is punya. It is eternal spiritual pious credit. Hridi antasto hyabhadrani, that that the abhadras, the unwanted things in the heart, the material attachments, the aversions we have towards a loving relationship with Sri Krishna, get removed from our heart. And then again, tying especially into today's topic, because I think I even uh, titled today's class, overcoming the eternal enemy of the soul. So again, it is a little bit counterintuitive. Generally, when we think of overcoming an enemy, we sort of think of us maybe conquering or slaying the enemy in combat. But this is actually a very different approach. That Hridyantastohya Bhadrani, are we the ones who remove the impurities from the heart? And this verse explains no. Vidunoti suhrit satam, that there is a suhrit, a very dear, our ever well-wisher who's in our heart. He is the one who does the overcoming for us. He is the one who overcomes our eternal enemy and brings about the conquest of pure love of Godhead within our heart. And so that, at the end of the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, whenever we come to that verse, when Krishna describes the peace formula, Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suhridam, and again, that word suhrid is there. Suhridam sarva bhutanam gyatvam shantam richati. Once we realize that I am not the one who has to make this enlightenment process happen. I'm not the one who makes the impurities, the lust, to go away from my heart. It's not a matter of, do I repress it hard enough, or am I successful in fulfilling it hard enough for it to resolve, for it to heal? No, I'm not the one who does the overcoming here. It's my suhrid, it's my dear ever well-wishing friend who's always in my heart. He is the one who does the overcoming for me. And it is specifically, even though he is eternally in the heart of every living being, even those spirit souls who are in the bodies of blades of grass, of animals, trees, and such, it's when we hear about Krishna that then the super soul in the heart, he takes action, because by hearing about him, he says that, okay, my eternal servant, he's favorably inclined towards me. He's actually turning his face towards me. He's listening to me. In the beginning of the 7th chapter, Krishna explains, Maya Shaktamana Partha Yogim Yunjan Madashraya Asamshayam Samagramam Yata Gyasyasi Tatshrinu. That Krishna says, just hear me, just listen to me. And by doing so, you'll develop your attachment to me. And all of your doubts, all of your misgivings will be removed. But I need you to hear me, to open your ear to me. By opening the ear, the heart is opened up as well. Um, and so this is how the ignorance and lust begins to be dispelled from our heart, that we ongoingly hear about Krishna from pure devotees, from pure personalities who are not only learned in Vedic wisdom, but who have actually realized the matter and who are deeply immersed in the practice of Krishna consciousness within their own life, and who are having deep realization of their own eternal relationship with Sri Krishna. And so then as we engage in this process day in and day out, then the next verse in the series goes, Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityang bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. That by this process of ongoingly, daily, it said, hearing about Krishna, Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu, all the unwanted things, all the misgivings in the heart are almost completely destroyed. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So this word nityam, in one sense, can be translated as eternal, and can also be translated as daily. So daily means that we need to make a daily practice of serving the Bhagavat. And Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas explained that there are two Bhagavats. There is the book Bhagavat, means that we actually make a regular habit of either hearing or reading the books like Srimad Bhagavad Gita, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. And Bhagavat also means the person Bhagavat, that those rare saintly personalities who are like who basically are the living embodiment of the teachings we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam. That again, they don't act out of lust, they act out of love of Godhead and out of compassion for the fallen living entities, for those who are still trying to enjoy this world, still bouncing back and forth between, okay, I'm gonna satisfy my desires by fulfilling them. Oh well, fulfilling my desires causes misery. I'm just gonna renounce everything in this world, and then they suffer with that, because the nature of the soul is not to be just restricted and renounced in all senses. The soul's nature, again, it's to enjoy, it's to love, and ultimately in relation with the Godhead, Sri Krishna. So it's this Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya means we need to pray to have the association and service of those living Bhagavats, those the person Bhagavats as they called. So both are essential. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttama Shloke, Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By hearing these narrations of Uttama Shloka, Sri Krishna, who's glorified in all these beautiful verses, then Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki, the word Naishtiki or Nishta, is described here, that one develops firm, resolute faith in the process of hearing and chanting in our eternal relationship with Sri Krishna. And then by becoming steady like this, then Tada Rajas Tamo Bhava, the third verse in the series, Kama Lobhadayaschaye, that in this word kama or lust is used here. Cheta eterana vidham stitam sattve prasidati. That gradually, as one becomes steady and practices hearing the book, Bhagavatam and serving the person Bhagavatam every day, then tada rajastamo bhava, that the lower modes of passion and ignorance start to go away. Kama lobhadayasya, then lust, anger, greed, wrath, envy, these these bad qualities start to leave our consciousness, start to dissipate, start to diminish within our nature. Um, and as we develop a real taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna, for experiencing the beauty of Sri Krishna through the ears, um, then cheta etera navidham stitam sattve prasidati, one then becomes situated in sattva. And sattva can at first mean the mode of goodness, that again, as our maybe more base tendencies to enjoy this world start to go away, we become more situated in the mode of goodness. Our mind and senses start to become calmer. And then ultimately, by the association of very elevated saintly personalities, this sattva starts to manifest as Shuddha sattva, as pure goodness without any tinge of the lower modes of passion and ignorance, as a type of goodness where we actually start to experience our eternal existence separate from matter altogether, and in relationship with the um, what was it? Drita Paramasattvam, the absolute truth, who is the undivided form of Vishuddha Sattva, or pure goodness. And then as this happens, then the day comes where Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogata Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana Mukta Sangyasya Jayate, that by living our life like this, and by cultivating this constant association with pure personalities throughout our life, daily receiving the message of the Bhagavat within our ears, and taking every chance we get to serve those personality Bhagavats, those very elevated saintly personalities and pure devotees, then we come to a point where we very directly, personally have direct experiences of Sri Krishna, Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam, that we come to the point, and this is, something we could only hope for in this lifetime, but we come to the point where we develop Bhagavat Tattva Vigyan, direct realization of what is described about Krishna, not just theoretical knowledge that, oh, well, I hear about Krishna, I hear that Krishna is so beautiful, I hear that he's such a wonderful personality, but maybe right now it's just theory. And so eventually, by living a life steeped in the message of transcendence, then we come to the point where we have direct personal realization. Some saintly personalities have, a direct vision of Krishna, or sometimes they may even, in the process of hearing about Krishna, actually experience the fragrance of Krishna, or experience a vision of the beauty of Krishna, or the sound of his flute, and so on. So Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam Mukta Sangyasya Jayate. At this point, one is considered a liberated soul, even if they are still occupying the physical body. And then the verses conclude by saying, Bidyate hridaya grantish chidyante sarva sangshaya, kshiyante chasya karmani, drishtra evatmani ishvare. That by this process of hearing and chanting throughout the course of one's life, in the association of pure devotees, then the knot of doubts within the heart is pierced, and all of one's karma, of the whole chain of one's karmic reactions, is destroyed, um, by seeing the supreme self, that ever well-wishing friend, as our eternal master. And so this is our process of overcoming the eternal enemy. It's surrendering, not to the enemy, but to Sri Krishna. By that very act of surrender, we are starting to cultivate our love for Sri Krishna, which is, you could say, the original form of lust in its pure form. It's love. It's the desire to please Krishna's senses. But as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains, when we don't want to please Krishna, then we have to accept the shelter of lust, of the desire to sort of lord it over this material nature, and try to enjoy it for ourselves. So with that, I will pause there for now. Colleen, I see you made a comment. The ever well wish in our hearts gives us hope and faith to overcome desires. So thank you for that comment, Colleen. And with that, we'll open the floor to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Abhimanyu. And yes, I have a comment and a question. Well, coming back to the question that I made at the beginning of the session, like, it's interesting to see that we're not either encouraged to repress ourselves, but also that doesn't mean that we should, indulge in all of our desires, because that's not also the solution. So you talked about how we should just try to replace or change our inner taste, like our current material taste, by a spiritual taste, like change. I've heard in a class that okay, we have a material path or emotion, so it's just about changing the emotion, like how you feel towards material things. Maybe at this moment, maybe you feel more excited about that than about a spiritual life. So it's about trying to change that taste, but and yeah, practicing spiritual life and just like giving up maybe that idea that you have to, try your best, but all you have to do is surrender, because it's not about your own effort, but about the mercy that you receive. But at the
Yeah.
same time, we're here, so we still have to face the reactions of our past deeds. And that reminded me of a verse that's also from Srimad Bhagavatam, where it says like, okay, while you wait for the Lord to bestow his mercy upon you, you should try to tolerate all the reactions of your past misdeeds and try to offer, your obeisances with heart, words, body, so that way you become eligible for liberation. And okay, so we try to do that, but I think when we desire something, there are moments when we desire something, like I really want to get this. So that could be also considered like a reaction from our past deeds, because we've been cultivating the taste for that. So as a reaction, we can just maybe we cannot tolerate the desire to get that. So I really want to get that. So in that moment, uh, how I don't know, let's say I'm trying to transform that, but I still feel like I eagerly want to get something. So, what could I do, or what can I ask myself in order to choose whether I should tolerate the feeling and, not moving forward? Yeah. Or if I should, okay, how do I decide if I should, okay, I know I have to do this or pursue this, because otherwise I'm going to be, I don't know, repressing myself maybe. I don't know if the question is clear enough on my side.
I guess the question, as I'm understanding it, is basically if there is, any particular desire that's really nagging at me, how do I know if it's something that I should go for, or if it's something that I need to sort of discipline myself not to
Yeah,
go
that's
for?
right. That's
Hmm. And so again, it is, a bit of a broad question. One consideration is, okay, well, if this is something maybe I know it's a habit that's, really not helpful for my personal development. I know it's a bad habit, something that has gotten me in trouble before, and yet I'm feeling this urge really strongly. I know even in just in like more, I guess, secular psychological terms, when we develop like a real strong compulsion or urge towards any specific behavior, and again, for some people that's substances, that's overeating, that's overly indulging in sex, whatever it is. There are so many objects of enjoyment that one can develop a compulsive attachment or an addiction to. Um, and so one commonality is that there's usually one we can look at, okay, well, what needs is this fulfilling for me? And how else can I meet those needs in a positive way? Um, because ultimately we might say, okay, well, I don't technically need to do this thing, but it's fulfilling certain. And again, those needs could be to de-stress myself, to comfort myself, to feel good about myself. And the tricky thing is that sometimes these very compulsive behaviors do fulfill those purposes in a very short-term way. That short-term could be for all of 15 seconds, but still it's effective and it works. And so it's really hard for our brain to not like say, okay, go for it, go for it. At least I know I'm going to feel better. I might only feel better for a few seconds, a few minutes, maybe a day or two, whatever it is. I know it's not going to last. I know I might feel worse afterwards, but at least I will feel better. And so that sense of certainty makes the brain drive really hard towards those compulsive addictive behaviors. So it's easier said than done, but oftentimes one has to sort of wait out and say, okay, well, what needs has this been fulfilling for me, and what do I actually need to do? Because there's, the cycle of compulsion and addiction is that I'm feeling bad because my needs are not met. And so instead of directly figuring out what it is that I really need and addressing it, I find ways to feel good without addressing my needs. Again, substances, overly indulging in sex, overeating, excessive screen time, you name it. We all may have our different compulsive behaviors. So okay, so I find this thing that it reliably makes me feel better in the moment. And naturally, the brain says, "Ooh, I want that. It's going to make me feel good." But because it's not actually addressing my need, again, it's sort of like pouring ghee on the fire where I initially feel better, but then afterwards I feel worse because now I've just gone more time not addressing my needs, and so now I feel worse, which makes me do the compulsive behavior more. So um, if it's a compulsive behavior like that, we know it's not healthy for us. Then we may have to do some hard inner searching about, again, what is it? What is it that I'm feeling, and what needs is, because again, feelings, they indicate some sort of needs. So what needs are being indicated by these distressing feelings? And yeah, let me actually have the patience and the tolerance to figure out, okay, well, yeah, what is it that is truly distressing me so much? What is it that I actually need? Or where is it that I'm kind of maybe avoiding or misinterpreting reality? So I'd say, it just, even in the secular sense, we may have some soul searching to do. In the spiritual sense, yeah, we may need to remember, okay, well, I know this is not favorable for my spiritual path. This is not what my spiritual masters have taught me. And the really, honestly, in sometimes in both cases, but especially on the spiritual path, it is important that we actually have, a mentor of sorts. Ideally, what you may call a shiksha guru, somebody who we really have faith in, who we can take guidance from in spiritual life, and who we can be honest with that. Yeah, actually, I'm really struggling to follow this one of the principles of our practice of bhakti yoga. um, it's somebody who we can actually be honest with. And again, all these verses emphasize that, again, it's not us who does the cleansing of the heart, and it is the super soul. But again, it's, the super soul is in the heart of every living entity, but it's only when we follow Krishna's instruction to hear him, to hear about him in the association of devotees, then the friend within the heart takes action. And in one sense, he had, the very fact that, when he sends a devotee into our life, that is his taking action. Jive sakshat nahitate guru chaitiruhepe, shiksha guru haya Krishna mahanta svarupe, that we cannot directly perceive the message of the super soul in our heart. So he appears before the external senses of the conditioned soul in the form of a liberated soul to guide and instruct us. So again, it is, definitely from the spiritual perspective, it's important to remember that we are not capable, nor are we meant to do this spiritual journey alone. We are meant to be, as much as possible, in the direct association of devotees. If we're not able to find that association physically, I mean, technology can be definitely a blessing, because there are so many associations of devotees out there. And so one way or another, it behooves us to to take shelter of such association, remembering that, again, it's not something that I can just grit my teeth and conquer these desires on my own. Maybe I can white knuckle it for a few days, but ultimately speaking, yeah, we are not meant to do this journey alone.
Yeah, well, that was really useful. Maybe it could help at a certain point. But as you say, yes, it is important to have the association of other people who are also on the same path and who can guide us. And that also made me think, like, I heard once, like, the mind is like a canvas. So whatever it comes in touch with, it's going to stain it. So if you come in contact with the, passion mood or goodness mood or darkness mood, so it's
Mhm.
gonna stain that canvas. So it's gonna automatically be taught by it. So you're gonna acquire those qualities, even if you don't realize, if you don't know, but everything's coming into your mind. So if you don't have that, that the environment that will prompt you to practice spiritual life, then yeah, it's gonna be harder if you don't have other people who support you. And also, well, last question. And I was thinking, like, oh my god, wait a minute.
Hmm.
Like I was telling you this, like this comment. So I think I forgot about the question. Okay, but it was something you were mentioning. Yes, it was something. See, I heard that. I don't know if this works for everyone, but I've heard that some devotees, there is the case when you really want to give up something, like a bad habit, okay, let's say, or a compulsory, habit. So, but you're not capable of doing it, though you try, but you still, end up indulging in it. But if you really want to give up on that, and like, okay, you cannot stand it anymore, but you can also help it, Like if you pray within your heart, like, okay, oh my Lord, I know this is not good. Let's say you're, I don't know, you're into drugs or something like that. But okay, so I'm doing this and I know this is not proper, but I offer this to you because I don't know what else to do with it. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to get rid of this. So you offer whatever you're doing, which you know it's not good for you or your spiritual life. And but if you sincerely want to give it up and you pray to the Lord from within your heart, then I've heard that some devotees this has worked for them. Like okay, they just sincerely pray and the Lord actually helps them, give up these habits. And yes, I've heard that a few times, and I don't know. I think a devotee was talking about it like it was like a recommendation from some shastra. Okay, if you can't really give it up, so you just pray and offer what you're doing, although it's not proper to offer that kind of thing to Krishna, to the Lord. Okay, but you should try to offer it anyway. But if it's sincere, then the Lord can help you get rid of it.
It's interesting. I haven't heard it exactly in terms of offering the direct, you could say, sinful or compulsive behavior to the Lord. Because I think in an explanation of the Rai Ramananda Samvad, or I forget where I just read it recently, but yeah, one cannot offer sinful activity to the Lord. However, there is a somewhat famous set of verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 20th chapter, verses 27 and 28. It goes, Jata Shraddho Mat Katasu Nirvinna Sarvakarmasu Veda Dukatmakan Kaman Parityagya Tato Bhajetamang Prita Shraddhalu Dridhanishchaya Dushamanas Chatan Kaman Dukodarkanks Jagarhayan. And the translation as I have it here is, having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories, being disgusted with all material activities, knowing that all sense gratification leads to miseries, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. Even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, and he sincerely repents such activities. So, at least in the context of this verse, it's not exactly talking about offering all of those things, because again, there are some habits we have that may be offerable, but some may not be. Some habits may not be offerable to Krishna. And so, what Krishna is saying here is that again, and it does come back to, awakening faith in the narration of my glories. That it starts uh, jata shraddha mat katasu, developing faith in my kata, recognizing, okay, yeah, I know my ultimate satisfaction is not in sense gratification, it's not in this material world. But even though I know all this, I'm not able to give it up. The word api anishvara means, Ishvara means the controller. Anishvara means one who is not the controller. So even if, even though he knows all of these things, he's still not in control of his behavior. So Veda Dukat Makan Kaman, he has a sense of repentance, recognizing that Krishna, I know this isn't good for me. But, the curious thing is that even though one is struggling with this, he says that Krishna says, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. So a lot of it is that even if we're still struggling to give up a bad habit, it's still maintaining the sort of confidence and faith that, okay, no, I'm not going to just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, I can't give it up. I guess I'm just not meant for Bhakti Yoga. And then we stop hearing and chanting. No, keep hearing and chanting. Keep on worshiping Krishna happily with faith and conviction. Remembering that again, it's, I can try, but ultimately the suhrit, the friend in the heart, he is the one who actually does the cleansing for me. And so, and on my time scale, it may feel like a long time that it's taking to clean, but again, don't get out. So okay, if I'm very dirty, don't get out of the shower. It's not okay. Well, this spot really stained in. I'm just going to get out of the shower and quit. It's like, no, stay in the shower. All the more reason. So, so yeah, I haven't heard it in terms of directly offering a potentially sinful activity to Krishna, but basically still continuing the positive, still hear chant, still join the association of devotees, and have that faith and conviction that Krishna wants me to succeed on this journey more so than I may even want to for myself. And so just by staying in the process, the purification will be affected by Krishna.
Well, thank you so much for the clarification. And I don't know if you could share again what the verse that you read was.
Yes, it's Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 20th chapter, verses 27 and 28. And it starts, Jata Shraddho Mat Katasu. The previous acharyas would very often quote this verse in encouragement to have faith in the narrations of Krishna's glories.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much again, Abhimanyu. Well, I don't know if you'd like to conclude with something. Um,
Um, just in summary, that the overcoming of the eternal enemy of the soul, we're not the ones who do the overcoming. We take shelter of Krishna, and specifically, we take shelter of the association of those advanced devotees who are actively speaking the topics about Krishna. And once we take advantage of such association, then and only then does the supreme friend within the heart take action and start to cleanse our heart as we hear more and more about him from his pure devotees.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful, and I truly enjoyed today's class. So thanks again, and I hope to see you soon in the next episode.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Okay, and to everyone who has joined today, thank you so much for being with us. Even if you're watching this later, thanks so much for sharing or following our content. And if you can share this with someone who you might think that needs it, please do so. It's important to share everything we learn about spiritual topics with others so they can also take benefit from it. And as a last reminder, we're going to meet every Monday and Thursday as always. And remember, Monday schedule is 7:30 p.m. and Thursday schedule is 8 a.m. Eastern time. So I hope to see you again on our next episode. And if you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to DM us or just leave it in the comments on YouTube. Also, to remind you that we have a Spotify playlist you can always listen to. And the name is Journey Through the Bhagavad Gita. So you can just search for it. And anytime you want to listen to the episodes again, we're going to be progressively uploading the audios of the episodes there. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, this class, and that it's beneficial for everyone. And see you on our next episode of Ashram Talks. Thank you so much and goodbye.